Breakfast with Louise and Dan.
Our headlines here this morning. At least 50 people have died as huge wildfires rage across Greece. A state of emergency has been declared.
The troubled generation, a big increase in the number of children being given antidepressants.
Satellite images appear to show North Korea has begun dismantling a key ballistic missile site.
Yesterday's top temperature was in Norfolk at 33.3 Celsius. Today's top temperature is more likely to be about 31. Once again, it's going to be hot and humid in the southeast, a bit more cloud with some showers in the northwest. But I'll have more details in 15 minutes.
Good morning. Despite the hot weather here, millions of us are jetting off to foreign holidays. So I'll be looking at how to make the most of your money and what to do if things go wrong.
And the hills are alive with Froome and Thomas on their bikes. Teammates Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas say there's no rivalry as they head into the final week of the Tour de France.
Hello, very good morning. It is Tuesday, the 24th of July. Our main story here this morning. Greek media is reporting that up to 50 people have been killed in deadly forest fires raging in areas close to Athens.
More than 100 people have been injured and hundreds more evacuated near the capital. Most of the victims have died in the coastal area of Mati, where people were trapped in either their homes or cars.
The Greek authorities have asked for international assistance to cope with the fires, as Andrew Plant reports.
Homes engulfed in flames on the outskirts of Athens as Greece fights some of its worst forest fires for years. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has declared a state of emergency here, with the death toll rising and scores of people injured.
We will do whatever is possible in order to control the fires. I'm very concerned at the outbreaks around Athens. We will do whatever it takes.
Police are now searching for a boat with 10 tourists on board. Many say they had to jump into the sea to escape the flames.
What can I say? It's over. We are alive, and that is what's important.
Thankfully, the sea was there, and we went into the sea because the flames were chasing us all the way to the water. It burnt our backs, and we jumped into the water.
In the height of the tourist season, hundreds of firefighters are battling to control the blaze here, the smoke visible above the Acropolis as countries across the globe bake in soaring summer temperatures. Sweden is battling some of its worst forest fires for decades, with almost no rainfall since mid-May. An area twice the size of Paris has already been destroyed. And experts warn it will continue, with the potential for even higher temperatures towards the end of this week. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
Well, a little earlier on Breakfast, we spoke to journalist Elinda Lambropoulou, who is in Athens.
Most of the confirmed victims were trapped in the seaside resort of Mati. That's very close to Athens, about 40 kilometers, and they died either in their homes or in their cars while trying to flee. From what we see, we've seen dozens of houses being completely burned down, many dozens of cars as well. Basically, we're looking at images of complete destruction in the area. And the Greek media are already talking about a national tragedy. We have very hot temperatures and strong winds. It's a very green area where many Athenians have their summer homes. Many people, including families with children who are now on school holidays, were at their summer homes at the time. And this partly explains the number of dead and the number of injured.
I'll keep you right up to date with that situation. Meanwhile, people here are being warned to stay out of the midday sun today, as most of the UK swelters in heatwave conditions. A level 3 heat alert is in place for much of east and southeast England, which saw the hottest day of the year yesterday in Suffolk, where the temperature reached 33.3 degrees Celsius. The Met Office says the first half of this summer is the driest since 1961.
So we're encouraging people to stay out of the sun during that period. If you're out and about in that period, sunscreen on, wearing a hat and wearing loose, cool clothing. And if you're out and about travelling, take some water with you.
The use of antidepressants for children is on the rise. In the past 3 years, 950,000 prescriptions were handed out in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Children aged 12 and under saw the largest increase of 24%. Our reporter Paul Connolly has more.
Antidepressants can have a powerful and often positive impact for people suffering from mental health issues. And a BBC investigation conducted by Radio 4's File on 4 has discovered that, in Britain, more children than ever before are being prescribed the drugs. The figures were obtained by Freedom of Information requests and relate to a group of antidepressants known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. They show that in England, over the past 3 years, there was a 15% rise in the number of these antidepressants prescribed to under 18s. In Scotland, there was a 10% rise, whilst in Northern Ireland, the number rose by 6%. And there were 950,000 prescription items between April 2015 and March 2018.
This is a very stressful time for young people with the pressures of social media and some of the very distressing news articles that are around at the moment. We need to remember that young people have a lot of pressures on their well-being, and it's actually a very positive thing if young people are stepping forward and asking for help with their mental health.
The Department of Health in England say they've pledged £1.7 billion to transform child and adolescent mental health services, whilst both Northern Ireland and Scotland say it is a priority issue and they're increasing funding. Paul Connolly, BBC News.
1 million public sector workers are expected to get pay rise in the biggest round of wage hikes for nearly a decade.
Our political correspondent Jonathan Blake joins us now from Westminster. Morning to you, Jonathan. So can we have a bit more detail, if possible? How much are we talking here, and who exactly is going to benefit?
Well, the highest pay increase will be 3.5%, but for most it'll be less than that. There are, as you say, about 1 million people affected: police officers, prison staff, doctors, teachers, those in the armed forces. They're in line for a pay rise which is agreed for the next year and the next year alone. It'll be backdated from April. The first question, where's this money coming from? Well, there's no new cash that the Treasury is putting up, so government departments are going to have to find the money to fund these pay rises from their existing budgets, which will of course mean savings have to be made elsewhere, and we can expect, I think, some criticism of that, because the view is that public services are stretched in many cases to the limit, and there simply is very little room for any further savings to be made. As for the pay rises themselves, well, it'll be welcome news this morning, no doubt, for those who are getting them. But let's not forget, public sector workers have had their wages capped in many cases at 1% increases year on year. The cost of living, meanwhile, has been going up by significantly more than that. So for many, they might think this is long overdue.
Jonathan, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much. That's Jonathan Blake in Westminster.
North Korea appears to have begun dismantling a key rocket launch site in the country's northwest. Satellite images seen by a US monitoring group suggest the Pyongyang regime is complying with the denuclearization promise made to President Trump in talks in June.
Millions of so-called just-about managing families are no better off today than they were 15 years ago. This is according to research by the Resolution Foundation. The not-for-profit social policy think tank estimates the finances of middle and low-income families were £100 worse off than they were back in 2003.
Members of the Thai youth football team, who were trapped underground for 2 weeks before being rescued, are to begin the process of becoming temporary Buddhist monks. Later today, the boys will have their heads shaved before spending 9 days in a monastery. They'll be joined by their coach for meditation and prayers to cleanse their souls and thank those who helped to free them.
And remember that famous photo of the Beatles on Abbey Road?
How could we forget?
The Pelican Crossing. Well, as Paul McCartney has, I suppose, recreated the iconic scene. Have a little look. Or you could say he's just crossed the road. There he is, behind the black van. The video of him walking alongside was filmed by his daughter Mary. Those look like an unsuspecting pair of ladies there walking across the other way.
Yeah, no idea it's Paul McCartney.
The original picture was taken in 1969 by the photographer Ian Macmillan.
11 minutes past 8. Morning. You're watching Breakfast. Now, a group of parents of children with special educational needs or disabilities are taking their local authority to the High Court today to challenge cuts in spending.
Today's case is against Bristol City Council, but at least 2 other authorities, that's Surrey and the London Borough of Hackney, face similar actions, and they all blame a lack of funding from central government. Well, Breakfast's Jane McCubbin has been to meet one of those families involved.
Local authorities are feeling the heat of falling budgets and rising demand for services, especially when it comes to the support of children with special educational needs. Like Kian, who has ADHD and autism.
It was really hard to focus and concentrate and stay in lessons for a certain amount of time in school beforehand.
But now you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Kian wants to work here on the steam trains, and right now he's working towards his GCSEs. But the one-to-one support and speech and language therapy which make that possible is costly. And his council, Surrey, says it has to make savings of £21 million on its SEN budget, a move the family will soon fight in the High Court.
If they don't have the funding in mainstream schools, then the teacher in a mainstream school is left with, say, 28 children and 2 with SEN. The 2 with SEN don't get the support, so that teacher has to direct the time for the 2 with SEN to keep them, to help them understand, to maybe help with the behaviour, that kind of thing, and all the children lose out.
Surrey Council said, "We are defending this claim. Our main focus is making sure children get the support they need." Jane McCubbin, BBC News.
Well, we're joined now from Westminster by Nadeem Zahawi, MP and Minister of State for Children and Families. Morning to you. Thanks for joining us. How has it come to this, that mothers like that are having to go to the High Court to get support for their children?
Well, local authorities have to make the decision as to how they spend the money for children with special educational needs. We've actually increased the budget. So the budget this year is £6 billion. It was £5 billion in 2013. We've also made available about 140 million additional investment, as well as a 265 million in capital to increase the number of places. So in Bristol, which you mentioned, this year they're getting 51 million. In Hackney, they're getting 42 million. And in Surrey, they're getting 142 million. They're also inspected now. So we've made probably the largest, most ambitious change in terms of the legislation and how we look after children with special educational needs. 340,000 children now have.
Thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about
education, health and care plan, which I just wanted to. So it's the local authority that has to decide how those children actually receive the best possible support with their needs.
Right. So thank you very much for telling us. And these sound like extraordinary amounts of money, but we've been covering this story for some time here on Breakfast, and it is clear that the families are not, whatever the numbers are, getting the help they need. What can be done about it, and done about it for soon?
It's a very good question. So the way the system works is, now that children have an education, health and care plan, local authorities are inspected by the CQC and Ofsted. We've had 63 inspections. 35 local authorities have been found to be doing a really good job. So Leeds, for example, Wiltshire, doing a very good job for their children and their families. Unfortunately, in areas like Surrey, they have been found to be wanting, and they've had to have a written statement of action. 28 other authorities, or 28 in total, have required a written statement of action to improve their services. And we will continue those inspections. I've written to Ofsted to say this is not the end of the process. Right. This is the beginning of the process, so that we make sure that the child's needs are at the heart of this, and quality is what we go after.
Are you saying then that it's the councils, in your view, that are not spending the money properly?
Well, no, look, I can't comment on specific cases. So Hackney actually has had a good inspection. Bristol hasn't been inspected, and Surrey's had an inspection where they've required a written statement of action, which means they have to improve. I don't know the specific cases that you have highlighted today, but it is important that we listen to parents, which is why we've got the parent forums, and it's important that we put the child at the heart of our reforms, which they are. I think most practitioners, most stakeholders in this area would agree that the EHC plans is the right way forward, but it's the beginning of the process, not the end of the process.
Well, you mentioned those plans. You mentioned the EHCP plans. The chair of the Education Select Committee has told us that policy is not adequately funded.
Look, I review and look at funding all the time. All I can say to you is, if you look at the numbers, £6 billion a year is now being spent on children with special educational needs and disabilities. I've made available another 140 million this year, and I will continue to keep a close eye and review the funding pressures on these local authorities. And I'm not going to sit here and arrogantly say to you there are no pressures. Of course there are pressures on the system, which is why we review it all the time. All I would say is the local authorities that are doing well, like Leeds, like Wiltshire, we have to learn from them and spread the good practice across the country.
Right. When might you have a result of this review?
I review all the time. This isn't it's not. I look at the funding pressures. We've got obviously a spending review next year, and I've got to make sure that my department understands where the pressures are, what good practice looks like, which local authorities are doing really well for those children, and how we can spread good practice.
We'll also hear in the newspapers today, or at least in the news today, that there may be a pay rise for public sector workers. Where is that money going to come from?
Well, look, it is good news. You haven't got long to wait to find out the figures. As the Secretary of State, Damien Hines, said over the weekend, you can't have great schools without having great teachers, and we've got to make sure that they are paid properly. And ultimately, we've got to find the money from budgets in government. I think you would agree that the prudent management of the economy by this government, by this Chancellor, by this Prime Minister has allowed us to hopefully put our best offer forward to teachers so that they're actually paid properly and get a rise that is commensurate with the hard work that they are delivering in all our schools.
So budgets will have to be squeezed in other places?
You have to be prudent about these things. You've got to make sure that we have to manage the economy and maintain you've seen the job figures that just came out in the last few weeks. The economy is dynamic, it's delivering for people, but at the same time, we're still having to deal with a mountain of debt that was left to us by the last Labour government. So we have to be prudent.
Nadeem Zahawi, Minister for Children and Families, thanks for your time here on Breakfast this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.
The weather has been a topic of some debate over the last few weeks, and this week particularly hot. Carol has been telling us about record temperatures yesterday and a mixed picture for some parts of the UK. Here is central London this morning. Gorgeous air looking over the Thames with the eye in the background.
Here's another picture from London. Carol is there. In fact, I think she's sort of in the middle of the screen, isn't she there? At the top middle of your screen there.
Yeah, look, there she is.
Can you see a beautiful vision? There you are, Carol. Morning. Lovely to see you.
Good morning. Thank you. Lovely to see you too. Good morning, everybody. This morning it is really warm if you haven't stepped out across many parts of England and also Wales. Across Northern Ireland and Scotland, it's a bit fresher for you. So you've probably had a more comfortable night for sleeping in than further south. Now, yesterday's top temperature was 33.3 Celsius, making it the warmest day of this year so far. And that was in Santon Downham in Suffolk. Today's highest temperature is likely to be somewhere in the southeast at round about 31 Celsius. So not quite as high, but still not to be sneezed at. Now, we've got a bit of a northwest-southeast split going on with the UK today. In the northwest, we've got a couple of weather fronts, so there's a bit more cloud and some showers, whereas in the southeast, it's remaining hot and humid, not just this morning, but right the way through the course of the day. On the charts, you can see that quite nicely. Showers across the northwest, and then we've got a line of cloud and showers extending across northern England, through Wales, skirting the north of Devon and Cornwall into the Isles of Scilly. Now, the showers on that front will tend to fade through the day, but we could see other showers develop across the southeast, the London area, but they will be hit and miss, and many of us won't see them at all. And away from those two weather fronts, there's a lot of dry and sunny weather. Across Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England, temperatures today, the high teens to the low 20s. For the rest of England and Wales, mostly from the low to the mid-20s, with a few exceptions more likely in the southeast. Now, as we head through the evening and overnight, any remaining showers in southern England will tend to fade. What you'll find is the showers will continue across the northwest of Scotland. In between, there'll be some clear spells, but it's going to be another muggy night, particularly in the south. Our range 10 to 18 Celsius. Fresher than that in some rural parts, for example, of Scotland. Tomorrow then we start on that muggy note. There'll be a lot of dry and sunny weather around. The showers in the north and west tending to merge to give some longer periods of rain. And we'll see sea breezes develop. So it will be cooler on the coast if you don't like it so hot inland and you can make it to the coast. But our top temperature tomorrow likely to be about 32, again somewhere in the southeast. Then as we head on into Thursday, well, our top temperature is likely to be about 34, possibly a little bit more than that somewhere in the southeast. There'll be a lot of dry and sunny weather around. There'll still be some showers across the north and west, but you could catch a shower in parts of the east. Again, they're hit and miss. Many of us will miss them altogether. And the heat will travel that bit further northwards. So in the north of England, where you've had the low 20s, you'll be looking at the high 20s. In Scotland, where you've had the high teens, you'll be looking at the low 20s. Then it looks like we'll see some thunderstorms develop from the south on Friday. Temperatures cool down a touch at the weekend, and then they pick up again through the course of next week. Dan and Lou.
Carol, thank you very much. 34 is going to be quite something, isn't it? Thank you very much. We'll see you in about half an hour.
We're going to talk about temperature on another planet now.
Yes, you're intrigued.
I am intrigued. When Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in 1969, it was thought to be the first time it had ever hosted life.
Now, almost 50 years later, scientists in London and the US believe that conditions would have been suitable for simple life forms around 4 billion years ago, roughly the same time life was beginning on Earth.
We're joined by the astrophysicist Chris Copperwheat from Liverpool John Moores University. Good morning to you. While we were listening to Carol talking about the temperature there, we were talking about the temperature on the moon. So we'll get to that in a little bit later. But tell us exactly what are these findings and what do they tell us about what might have happened on the moon?
OK, so when we think of the moon, we think of a dead, airless rock, lifeless, blasted by solar radiation, a very unpleasant place. But the moon in the past was quite different. So something we know now is there's a lot of water on the moon below the surface, and in the mantle, underneath the rocks, there's a lot of water. We know in the past the moon had a magnetic field. So the Earth has a magnetic field. This protects us a lot from solar radiation and that sort of thing, the highly energetic particles that could kill life. And the new finding now is that there's evidence there were periods in the moon's past where it had a fairly thick atmosphere. So in the past, the moon was very volcanic. If you look at the moon, you see the light patches and the dark patches. The dark patches is mostly sort of iron compounds that were thrown up by volcanic activity in the past. So there have been